The dream always started the same way. I'm standing in my wedding dress, the ivory silk cool against my skin, the scent of gardenias heavy in the air, my grandmother's favorite flower. I'm looking at Daniel, my fiancé, his smile perfect, his eyes loving. Then the music changes. The wedding march becomes a funeral dirge. And she appears. My grandmother Eleanor, Nana to me, standing in the church doorway in the blue dress she was buried in 5 years ago. Her expression isn't the gentle one I remember from childhood. It's urgent, terrified. "Chloe," she says, her voice echoing though no one else seems to hear. "Don't do this, baby girl. Cancel the wedding." In the dream I always try to speak to ask why, but my voice is gone. Daniel keeps smiling unaware. The guests keep watching. And Nana keeps shaking her head, tears streaming down her transparent cheeks. His family, Chloe. What they hide. What they've done. Don't marry into that darkness. Then I wake up. 3 nights in a row. The same dream. The same warning. Tonight I sat bolt upright in bed, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. Daniel slept peacefully beside me, one arm thrown over his eyes, his breathing deep and even. The digital clock glowed 3:17 a.m., the witching hour, Nana would have called it. I slipped out of bed, padding to the kitchen of our Seattle loft. Moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the stainless steel appliances in silver. I made tea, chamomile, Nana's remedy for everything, and sat at the island, watching the city lights twinkle below. "It's just stress," Daniel had said when I told him about the first dream. "Wedding planning anxiety. Everyone gets it." But this didn't feel like anxiety. Felt like a warning. Nana and I had always been close. Closer than I was with my own mother, who'd been more interested in her corporate career than parenting. Nana had raised me, teaching me to trust my intuition, to notice the signs life gives you. "Women in our family have the sight, Chloe," she told me when I was 12 and had predicted my teacher's pregnancy before anyone knew. Not full-blown psychic powers, but whispers. Pay attention to the whispers. 4 years after her death, the whispers had been silent. Until 3 days ago. 3 days before my wedding. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Maya, my best friend and maid of honor. "Can't sleep. You up?" I called her instead. "The dream again," I said without preamble. Maya was silent for a moment. "Same one. Exactly the same. Every detail." I sipped my tea, my hands shaking. "Maya, what if she's trying to tell me something? Or what if you're just freaking out because you're getting married in 72 hours? Maya said gently, "Cold feet is normal, Chloe. This isn't cold feet. This is ice-cold terror." I took a deep breath. She mentioned his family. Said not to marry into their darkness. Maya was quiet again. She'd never warmed to Daniel's mother, Margaret. "Well, Margaret is intense. But darkness? That seems extreme." That's when I remembered the box. "Nana left me something," I said slowly. "A wedding gift," she called it. Said to open it if I ever had doubts. "Where is it?" Maya asked. "Storage unit. With the rest of her things. I hadn't been able to go through them after she died. Too painful." "Then let's go," Maya said. "Right now." "Now? It's 3:30 in the morning. Chloe, if you're having dead grandmother warnings about your wedding, we're not waiting for business hours." She was right. An hour later, we stood in front of storage unit 214, the metal door cold under my hands. The key, always on my keychain though I'd never used it, turned with a reluctant screech. The unit smelled of dust and memories. Furniture covered in sheets. Boxes labeled in Nana's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, photo albums, Chloe's art projects. And in the back, a small wooden chest I remembered from her bedroom, carved with roses, the same pattern as my engagement ring. My breath caught. "That's it." Maya helped me lift it out. It was lighter than I expected. I carried it to a cleared space, kneeling on the concrete floor. The lock was simple, the key taped to the bottom of the chest. It opened with a click. Inside were 3 things: a leather-bound journal, a sealed envelope with "For Chloe on her wedding day," written in Nana's hand, and a vintage brooch, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "Open the letter," Maya whispered. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The paper was heavy, expensive. Nana's familiar handwriting filled the page. My dearest Chloe, if you're reading this, then you've had the dreams. I'm sorry for that, my love. I hoped you wouldn't inherit this particular family trait, but it seems the sight has passed to you as it did to me. What I tell you now I learned too late. The hard way. The Hayes family, Daniel's family, has secrets. Dark ones that go back generations. Secrets they protect at all costs. I tried to warn your Aunt Sarah 30 years ago when she was engaged to Robert Hayes, Daniel's father. She didn't listen. She married him. And 6 months later she was dead. They called it an accident. A fall down the stairs. But I knew. I felt it. And when I confronted Margaret, she threatened me. Said if I ever spoke of it again, you would be in danger. So I stayed silent. To protect you. But I can't stay silent now. Not if you're planning to marry Daniel. In the back of this journal you'll find addresses. Places to look. Start with the Hayes family home in Portland. There's a room they keep locked. What's inside will tell you everything. I love you, my brave girl. Trust your instincts. They're my voice now. Always, Nana. The letter fluttered from my hands. Maya picked it up, reading it quickly. When she finished, her face was pale. Chloe, your aunt died before you were born. You said it was a car accident. That's what I was told. My voice sounded distant, disconnected from my body. Nana never mentioned any of this. Maya picked up the journal, flipping to the back. There in Nana's handwriting was a list. Addresses, dates, names. And one sentence underlined twice. The locked room is on the 3rd floor. East wing. Margaret has the only key. Portland, Maya read. That's where Daniel's family home is. Where we're supposed to go for the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. The dream warnings. The letter. The journal. Daniel's voice came from behind us. Chloe, what are you doing here? I turned, the letter still in my hand. Daniel stood in the storage unit doorway, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy from sleep. I couldn't sleep, I said, tucking the letter behind my back. What are you doing here? I woke up and you were gone. Your phone was on the counter. I tracked your location. He stepped inside, his eyes taking in the open chest, the journal in Maya's hands. What's all this? Just some of Nana's things, I said, my heart pounding. Wedding stuff. He looked at me, his expression shifting from concern to something else. Suspicion? At 4:30 in the morning? Maya stepped forward, ever the protector. We're reminiscing. Girl stuff. You know how emotional weddings are. Daniel's eyes didn't leave mine. You've been having those dreams again, haven't you? I nodded, unable to speak. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Chloe, it's just stress. My mother warned me this might happen. She said you seemed fragile lately. The word fragile stung. And the fact that he discussed my dreams with his mother felt like a betrayal. Your mother said that? My voice was sharper than I intended. She's concerned about you, Daniel said, stepping closer. We all are. Maybe we should postpone the wedding. Give you more time to. No. The word came out firm, surprising us both. I don't need more time. I need answers. Answers to what? Daniel asked, his voice carefully neutral. I made a decision then. One that would change everything. I need to see your family home. Before the rehearsal dinner. Today. Daniel blinked. Why? Because Nana wanted me to have something from there. A family heirloom. She mentioned it in her letter. The lie came easily, smoothly. A skill I didn't know I possessed. Daniel studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, we'll drive down this morning. But Chloe. He took my hands, his warm, familiar hands that had held mine through so much. Promise me you'll talk to me if you're having doubts. Don't listen to dreams. Don't listen to old letters. Listen to us. To what we have. I looked into his eyes, the eyes I'd fallen in love with, the eyes that had promised me forever. And for the first time I wondered what secrets they hid. I promise, I said. And it wasn't entirely a lie. I would listen to us. But I would also listen to my grandmother. To the whispers. to the truth that was waiting in a locked room in Portland. As we packed Nana's chest into my car, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I didn't know what I would find at the Hayes family home. But I knew this. My dead grandmother had warned me to cancel my wedding, and I was going to find out why before I walked down any aisle. The drive from Seattle to Portland should have been beautiful. The evergreen forests of Washington giving way to Oregon's rolling hills, the morning sun breaking through clouds in dramatic shafts of light. But today the beauty felt threatening, like nature was putting on a show to distract from what awaited us. Daniel drove in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel of his Tesla. He'd been quiet since we left the storage unit, offering only clipped responses to my attempts at conversation. The easy banter that usually filled our road trips was gone, replaced by a tension so thick I could taste it, metallic like blood or fear. In the passenger seat, I clutched Nana's journal like a lifeline. I'd told Daniel it was just her old recipes and memories, but the truth was hidden between its pages, addresses, dates, and cryptic notes about the Hayes family that grew more disturbing the further I read. Robert Hayes, 1989. One entry read, questioned about missing funds at family foundation. Investigation closed abruptly. Margaret Hayes, 1992. Another noted, 3 maids dismissed in 1 year. All signed NDAs. What did they see? And most chilling, Sarah Hayes, née Bennett, 1993. Death certificate says accidental fall. Coroner's report sealed. Why seal an accident? My Aunt Sarah. My father's sister, who died before I was born. The sister he never spoke of. The loss that haunted our family in whispers and avoided glances. I'd always been told she died in a car accident. But Nana's journal told a different story. A story of a fall. A story of sealed records. A story that ended with my grandmother being threatened by Margaret Hayes. Penny for your thoughts, Daniel said, breaking the silence. I jumped, the journal slipping from my hands. Just nervous about meeting your family again. Last time with your mother was intense, he finished for me. I know. She's protective. Old-fashioned. But she loves you, Chloe. She's just worried you're not traditional enough for our family. The words hung in the air, loaded with implications I was only beginning to understand. What does that mean? Traditional enough? I asked carefully. Daniel shifted in his seat. Just, your career, your independence. The Hayes women usually focus on family, on supporting their husbands. I stared at him. You've never said that before. Because it doesn't matter to me, he said quickly, reaching for my hand. I love you exactly as you are. But my mother, she comes from a different time. A different time, or a different set of values. Values that might include covering up deaths and threatening old women. We crossed the Columbia River into Oregon, Portland's skyline emerging in the distance. Daniel took the exit for the West Hills, where old money lived in restored Victorians with views of the city below. The Hayes family home was exactly as I remembered from my few visits, imposing. 3 stories of dark brick and gingerbread trim, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to lean away from the house, as if even they wanted distance. The wraparound porch, usually charming in daylight, looked sinister in the overcast morning, shadows pooling in its corners like spilled ink. Margaret was waiting on the porch, a silhouette against the stained glass front door. Even from the driveway I could feel her watching us, her posture rigid, her arms crossed. She didn't need to meet us outside, I murmured. She's excited, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. As we exited the car, Margaret descended the steps, her smile not reaching her eyes. Chloe, Daniel, you're early. Traffic was light, Daniel said, kissing her cheek. Chloe insisted on coming early, Margaret said, her gaze fixed on me. Something about a family heirloom? My throat went dry. My grandmother mentioned. She wanted me to have something from the Hayes family. For the wedding. Margaret's smile tightened. Eleanor Bennett had quite the imagination. Come inside. Your father's in the study, Daniel. The interior of the house was exactly as unsettling as I remembered, beautifully preserved but frozen in time. Dark wood paneling, heavy velvet drapes, Portraits of stern-faced Hayes ancestors watching from the walls with judgmental eyes. The air smelled of lemon polish and something else. Something damp and old, like closed-up rooms and secrets. "Can I use the restroom?" I asked, needing a moment alone. "Of course," Margaret said, her eyes tracking me. "Down the hall, second door on the left." But instead of going to the restroom, I slipped into the library, a room I remembered from previous visits that had a floor plan of the house displayed in a glass case. An old architectural drawing framed and mounted, showing all 3 floors. My eyes went immediately to the 3rd floor. East Wing. Just as Nana's journal had described, there was a room at the end of the East Wing corridor. On the drawing it was labeled storage, but the dimensions were wrong for storage, too large. And there was no door shown connecting it to the hallway. A hidden room. Or a locked one. "Find what you're looking for?" I jumped, turning to find Margaret in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I was just admiring the house," I said too quickly. "The architecture. It's been in the Hayes family for 5 generations," she said, moving to stand beside me. Her perfume was expensive but cloying, gardenias, the same scent from my dream. Every board, every nail. Hayes built. Hayes maintained. Hayes protected. The way she said protected sounded like a threat. "Must be wonderful to have such deep roots," I said, forcing a smile. "It's a responsibility," she corrected. "To preserve what matters. To protect the family legacy. At all costs." Her eyes held mine, and in that moment, I knew she knew about Nana's journal. Knew about the warning. Knew why I was really here. "Margaret," Daniel called from the hallway. "Dad wants to show us the garden before lunch." "Of course," she said, her smile returning, plastic and perfect. "Come along, Chloe. The garden is lovely this time of year." But as we walked down the hall, I felt her hand on my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Be careful what you dig up, dear," she whispered, her voice low and cold. "Some things are buried for a reason." Lunch was a strained affair in the formal dining room. Robert Hayes, Daniel's father, held court at the head of the table, pontificating about business and politics while Margaret served roast chicken with surgical precision. Daniel was uncharacteristically quiet, picking at his food. "Chloe tells me she's looking for a family heirloom," Margaret said during a lull in conversation. "Something Eleanor mentioned." Robert's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Eleanor Bennett? That woman had too much imagination for her own good." The venom in his voice surprised me. "You knew my grandmother?" "Unfortunately," he said, recovering his composure. "She had ideas about our family. Unpleasant ideas." "What kind of ideas?" I asked, my heart pounding. Robert waved a dismissive hand. "Ancient history. She was grieving her daughter. Looking for someone to blame. Her daughter. My Aunt Sarah. Sarah's death was very hard on everyone," Margaret said smoothly. "Such a tragic accident." "Was it an accident?" The words were out before I could stop them. The room went silent. Daniel stared at me. Robert's face darkened. "And Margaret?" Margaret smiled, but her eyes were deadly. "What a strange question, dear," she said softly. "Of course it was an accident. Why would you think otherwise?" "My grandmother's journal," I began, then stopped. "Too much." I'd said too much. "You have Eleanor's journal?" Robert's voice was dangerously calm. "Just recipes. Memories." I forced a laugh. "Silly, I know." The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. Afterward, Daniel pulled me aside in the hallway. "What was that, Chloe?" "Accusing my family of..." "What exactly?" "I wasn't accusing." "You were." His eyes searched mine, and for the first time I saw fear in them. Not anger. Fear. "My parents are traditional, conservative. They don't like drama. And questions about Sarah's death. That's the kind of drama that gets people hurt." The warning was clear. But instead of scaring me, it galvanized me. People got hurt. My aunt got hurt. My grandmother got threatened. I needed to see that locked room. While Daniel helped his father with something in the study, I slipped away, taking the back staircase to the 2nd floor. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels watchful. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a warning. Every shadow seemed to move. I found the staircase to the third floor, narrow servants' stairs hidden behind a door in the upstairs hallway. The air grew colder as I ascended, the temperature dropping with each step. The third floor was unlike the rest of the house. Less preserved, more neglected. Dust sheeted every surface. Cobwebs draped corners like mourning veils. The east wing corridor stretched before me, dark and foreboding. At the end, just as the floor plan showed, was a door. Heavy oak with an old-fashioned lock. But beside it, something the floor plan hadn't shown. A faded patch on the wallpaper where another door might have been. A door that had been sealed shut. I approached slowly, my heart hammering. The lock was new. A modern deadbolt installed on an ancient door. Margaret had the only key, Nana's journal had said. But as I examined the door frame, I noticed something. The molding along the top was ornate, carved with the same rose pattern as Nana's chest and my engagement ring. And at the center of the pattern, one rose was different. Its center was a keyhole. A hidden keyhole. My hands trembled as I removed my engagement ring. The band was carved with the same rose pattern. On a whim, I pressed the largest diamond into the keyhole rose. Fit perfectly, and turned with a soft click. A section of the molding swung open, revealing a small compartment. And inside, tarnished with age but unmistakable, was the key. Nana had given me the key years ago without me knowing. In the ring she'd insisted Daniel use for my proposal. She'd planned for this, prepared for this. The key turned smoothly in the modern deadbolt. The door swung inward silently, as if expecting me. The room was not storage. It was a bedroom frozen in time. A woman's bedroom from the early 1990s, preserved like a museum exhibit. Floral wallpaper. A four-poster bed with a lace canopy. A vanity with perfume bottles and brushes. And photographs. Dozens of them. A young woman with my eyes, my smile. Sarah Bennett. My aunt. I moved to the vanity, my reflection ghostly in the dust-covered mirror. In the reflection I saw what I hadn't noticed. The wall behind me was covered not with wallpaper, but with writing. Words scratched into the plaster over and over. Help me. They won't let me leave. Margaret knows. The baby. The baby. My eyes dropped to the desk where a journal lay open. Sarah's journal. The date on the open page. October 15, 1993. 3 days before her death. I told Robert about the baby today. He was furious. Said I'd trapped him. Said Margaret would handle it. I'm scared. Margaret looks at me like I'm something to be removed. Problem to be solved. Nana Eleanor warned me. She said the Hayes family destroys what they can't control. I didn't listen. I thought love was enough. I was a fool. If something happens to me, know this. It wasn't an accident. And tell my brother to protect his daughter. When she's born, keep her away from them. Promise me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the page. The next entry was the last. They've locked me in this room. Margaret says it's for my safety, until I come to my senses about the baby. Robert won't look at me. Daniel is just a boy. He doesn't understand. I heard them arguing last night. Margaret said, "We can't have another heir contesting the inheritance." Robert said, "Do what you have to do." I'm so scared and so sorry. For the baby. For myself. For whatever girl Robert's son marries one day. Tell her to run. Tell her the Hayes family loves like poison. Sweet until it kills you. The journal slipped from my hands. The room spun. The whispers Nana had told me to listen to weren't whispers anymore. They were screams. Screams from a dead woman. Warnings from a grave. My aunt had been pregnant. With Robert's child. A child that would have been Daniel's half-sibling. A child that threatened the inheritance. And they killed her for it. Or Margaret did. With Robert's permission. I stumbled from the room, locking it behind me. The key clutched so tightly in my hand it cut my palm. Blood welled, red and real in this house of ghosts. As I descended the stairs, I heard voices from the study, Margaret and Robert arguing. "She's upstairs right now, I know it," Margaret was saying. "She has Eleanor's journal. She knows." "Then we handle it," Robert said, his voice cold. "Like we handled Sarah. Like we handled Eleanor when she got too close." Daniel won't allow it, Margaret said. Daniel will do what's best for the family, Robert snapped. He always has. I backed away, my blood turning to ice. They'd handled Nana too. Not just threatened. Handled. And Daniel knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. The pieces crashed together. The dreams, the warnings, the locked room, the journal. My grandmother hadn't just been warning me about marrying into a family with secrets. She'd been warning me about marrying into a family of murderers. And as I stood in that dark hallway, the truth settling over me like a shroud, I realized something even more terrifying. The wedding was in 2 days. And the Hayes family didn't just bury their secrets. They buried anyone who tried to dig them up. Time fractured in the hallway outside the study. Each second stretched, thin and brittle, filled with the echo of Robert's words. Like we handled Sarah. Like we handled Eleanor. Handled. Such a clean corporate word for murder. My body moved on instinct, a silent retreat back down the servants' staircase, my mind a white noise scream. The key, Sarah's key, Nana's key, was a brand in my bleeding palm. I didn't remember descending to the second floor, didn't remember weaving through the maze of hallways. I only came back to myself when I found the door to a small, forgotten sitting room and slipped inside, locking the door behind me. The room was musty and dim, shrouded in sheets. I sank to the floor behind a sheet-draped armchair, my back against cold wallpaper, and finally let the tremors take me. I cradled my injured hand, the cut stinging, my blood a dark red against my skin. A shocking proof of life in this house of death. Sarah's words scrolled behind my eyes. They've locked me in this room. Do what you have to do. Tell her to run. And Nana's final plea in her letter. To protect you. I had to get out. Now. But the house felt like a living thing. Its corridors a digestive tract waiting to close around me. The Tesla keys were in Daniel's pocket. My phone was downstairs in my purse on the hall table. I was trapped. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. I froze, holding my breath. Muffled voices filtered through the door. Check the third floor again. She found the room, I know it. Margaret's voice clipped and cold. She couldn't have opened it, Robert grumbled. Eleanor was clever. She would have left a way. A pause. Find her. Before Daniel does. He's still sentimental. We can't have him wavering now. Their footsteps receded. I waited, counting my heartbeats, until the silence felt thick enough to move through. Think, Chloe. Think. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. This wasn't a servant's room. It was a lady's sitting room, old-fashioned. A writing desk sat in the corner. I crawled to it, yanking open drawers with frantic, quiet urgency. Empty. Empty. Then in the last drawer my fingers brushed against cold metal. A old rotary dial telephone. The cord trailed behind the desk, plugged into the wall. A landline. My lifeline. I lifted the heavy receiver to my ear. A dial tone. A beautiful, miraculous sound. I punched in Maya's number from memory, my fingers slipping on the dial. It rang once. Twice. Hello. Her voice was an anchor in the storm. Maya. I whispered, the word cracking. It's me. I'm at the Hayes house. I'm in trouble. Chloe? Where are you? What's wrong? They killed her. They killed my Aunt Sarah. And I think they killed Nana too. They know I know. You need to call the police. Send them to 1771, Crestview Drive, Portland. The 3rd floor, East Wing. Tell them it's a possible homicide, sealed records. The words tumbled out in a frantic, low rush. Oh my God. Are you safe? Where are you in the house? A sitting room, 2nd floor, west side, I think. Locked. But they're looking for me. I heard footsteps ascending the main staircase. I have to go. Please, Maya. Hurry. I'm calling now. Stay hidden. I'm coming, Chloe. I'm getting in my car right now. I hung up, the click echoing loudly in the quiet room. The footsteps were closer now, methodical. Doors opened and shut down the hall. Thump, thump, creak. They were checking rooms. I looked around for a weapon, a better hiding place. Nothing. Just dust and draped furniture. The window. I scrambled to it, wrestling with the stiff latch. It opened with a groan, revealing a sheer 2-story drop onto a stone patio below. No escape there. The footsteps stopped outside my door. The knob turned, rattled against the lock. "This one's locked," Robert's voice said, just on the other side of the wood. "The key," Margaret replied. A jingle of keys. My heart stopped. Of course she had a master key. This was it. I was cornered. I backed into the farthest corner behind the desk as the lock clicked. The door swung open. Margaret stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the hall light, her expression unreadable. Robert loomed behind her. "There you are, dear," she said, her voice deceptively soft. "We've been looking for you. You left the lunch table so abruptly." "I felt ill," I managed to say, straightening up, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "The chicken, perhaps." "I don't think it was the chicken," Robert said, stepping into the room. His gaze swept over me, lingering on my clenched, bloody hand. "I think you've been poking around where you don't belong." I got lost. My voice was too high, too thin. Margaret glided into the room, closing the door softly behind her. The click of the latch was a death knell. "Lost? And yet you found a room that hasn't been opened in 30 years. How remarkable." She took another step. I mirrored it, keeping the desk between us. "What did you find, Chloe?" Robert asked, his voice dropping to a menacing rumble. "Nothing. Just a dusty old room." "Liar." The word was a whip crack. Margaret's placid mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of feral fury beneath. "You have her journal. You opened the door. You know." The admission hung in the air. There was no point denying it. "I know you killed her," I said, the accusation giving me a sliver of courage. "I know you killed Sarah. And I know you threatened my grandmother." Margaret's laugh was a short, dry sound. Killed is such a dramatic word. Sarah was unstable, hysterical. The pregnancy, it unhinged her. She fell. It was a tragedy, not a conspiracy. She wrote that you locked her in that room, that you were going to handle the baby. She was paranoid. Robert snapped. Writing nonsense in a diary. We were trying to help her, to protect the family from scandal. By locking her up? I shot back. By letting her fall? Enough. Margaret's voice sliced through the room. This ends now. You will give us your grandmother's journal. You will forget whatever you think you read. You will marry Daniel on Saturday, and you will be the quiet, devoted wife this family requires. Or what? I challenged, though my knees were shaking. You'll handle me too? Like you handled Nana? Margaret's eyes went cold and flat. Eleanor had a heart attack. She was old. It was her time. Convenient timing, I whispered. Give me the key, Chloe. She extended her hand, palm up. It wasn't a request. My fingers tightened around it, the metal teeth biting into my cut. This key was all the proof I had. No. Robert took a threatening step forward. Don't be stupid, girl. You're part of this family now. Start acting like it. The past stays buried. That's how legacy survives. I am not part of this family, I spat, the rage finally breaking through the fear. And I am not burying another Bennett woman for you. The distant wail of a siren cut through the tense silence. Faint at first, then growing louder, closer. Maya. A flicker of panic crossed Margaret's face. Robert's head snapped toward the window. What have you done? Margaret hissed. I called for help. I lifted my chin. The police are on their way. I told them about the room. About Sarah. The sirens were unmistakable now, turning onto our street. Red and blue lights strobed through the gaps in the drapes. Robert's face contorted with rage. He lunged for me, but Margaret caught his arm. No, not now, she snarled at him. Her mind was racing, recalculating. The cold strategist reasserting control. She turned her venomous gaze back to me. You think you've won? You've just made everything much, much harder for yourself. And for Daniel. The sound of car doors slamming outside. An authoritative knock echoed through the grand foyer below. Chloe. Daniel's voice called from somewhere downstairs, confused and alarmed. Mom? Dad? What's going on? Margaret leaned close to me, her gardenia scent suffocating. Remember this, dear. You will marry my son, or the next tragedy in your family will be very, very real. And it won't be an old woman's heart. Her eyes dropped meaningfully to my stomach, then back to my face. Do you understand? The implicit threat, against Maya, against my future children, turned my blood to ice. She straightened up, her mask of gracious hostess sliding back into place as if by magic. Now let's go greet our guests. And Chloe? She smiled sweetly. Cut your hand on some broken glass, didn't you? Be careful, you're so accident prone. Just like your aunt. She swept from the room, Robert glowering behind her. I stood frozen, the sirens and the shouting below feeling distant, drowned out by the roaring in my ears. I had summoned the cavalry, but I had just declared war. And Margaret Hayes had shown me she fought without rules, without mercy, and generations deep. Stumbling to the window, I peeled back the drape. 2 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan were in the driveway. Officers were speaking with a distraught-looking Daniel on the porch. Margaret was already there, a picture of concerned confusion, gesturing gracefully. One of the officers, a tall woman with a stern face, looked up toward the house. Her eyes seemed to meet mine through the window. She said something to her partner and pointed. It was time to face them. Time to tell the truth. I shoved the key deep into my pocket, wiped my bloody hand on my jeans, and walked toward the door on trembling legs. As I reached for the knob, my gaze fell on the old telephone. A new desperate idea formed. Quickly, I ripped a page from a crumbling book on the desk. With a stub of pencil I found, I wrote 2 lines, folded the paper, and tucked it deep into the cradle of the phone receiver, where it wouldn't be seen unless someone picked it up. For the police. Sarah's diary is in the 3rd floor east room. They killed her. Check Eleanor Bennett's death. Protect Maya Rodriguez. It was a message in a bottle. A backup plan. I took a steadying breath and stepped out into the hallway. The weight of the house, of its secrets, of the decades of silence pressed down on me. But beneath that weight, a new resolve hardened. Nana had warned me to cancel the wedding. Sarah had begged from beyond the grave for someone to tell me to run. But running wasn't enough anymore. Not when the poison had already spread so far. I walked down the grand staircase, every eye turning to me. The police, Daniel's confusion, Margaret's hidden malice, Robert's simmering fury. The officer, her badge reading Detective Vance, stepped forward. Are you Chloe Bennett? You called about a possible homicide. All the lies, the threats, the generations of fear, coiled in my throat. I looked at Daniel, his face a mask of betrayed bewilderment. I looked at Margaret, whose eyes promised endless night. I met the detective's gaze. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong in the cavernous foyer. My name is Chloe Bennett. And I have evidence that Margaret and Robert Hayes murdered my aunt, Sarah Bennett Hayes, 30 years ago. And I believe they were responsible for the death of my grandmother, Eleanor Bennett. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Daniel's sharp, wounded gasp and the soft, chilling smile that touched Margaret's lips. The wedding was in 2 days. But first there would be a funeral for the truth. Time, which had been crawling, now snapped forward with violent speed. The stunned silence in the foyer lasted only a second before it shattered into chaos. What is she talking about? Daniel's voice was a wounded animal's cry. He looked from me to his parents, his face a canvas of betrayal and confusion. Mom? Dad? Margaret's performance was masterful. Her hand flew to her chest, her eyes widening with well-practiced shock. Oh, Chloe, the stress, the wedding, she's not well, officer. My poor future daughter-in-law has been under immense pressure. She's been having episodes. Robert found his voice, blustering with indignant fury. This is outrageous. Slander. My brother's wife died in a tragic accident decades ago. This is the ranting of a hysterical girl. Detective Vance, a woman in her 50s with a calm, weathered face and eyes that missed nothing, held up a hand. The 2 uniformed officers behind her shifted subtly, blocking the main doorway. Let's everyone take a breath. Her gaze, steady and assessing, landed on me. Miss Bennett, you've made a very serious allegation. Can you show me this evidence? Before I could speak, Margaret glided forward, a picture of matronly concern. She can't, because there isn't any. It's all in her head. Daniel, darling, you've seen how she's been. The nightmares. The paranoia. Daniel stared at me, conflict tearing at him. Chloe, you said you were just anxious. I found the room, Daniel, I said, my voice trembling but clear. The locked room on the 3rd floor. Your mother has the only key. But my grandmother left me one. I pulled the tarnished key from my pocket, holding it up. My cut palm throbbed in time with my heartbeat. What room? Daniel looked genuinely bewildered. The old storage room? That's just full of junk. It was your Aunt Sarah's room, Daniel, I said softly, watching the name land on him. The one she was locked in before she died. She kept a diary. She was pregnant. And she was afraid for her life. Daniel's face went ashen. That's impossible. It's not just possible, it's true, I pressed on, turning back to Detective Vance. The diary is on the desk in that room. She wrote that Margaret and Robert were going to handle the pregnancy because it threatened the inheritance. 3 days later, she was dead. They called it a fall. Detective Vance's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. And your grandmother's involvement? She knew. She tried to warn my aunt, then tried to investigate after she died. Margaret threatened her. And then 6 months ago, my grandmother died of a sudden heart attack. She had no history of heart problems. I met Margaret's icy gaze across the foyer. She was old, they'll say. It was her time. This is fantasy. Robert boomed, his face purpling. I want this girl out of my house. And I want her charged with defamation. Sir, please, Detective Vance said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She nodded to one of the uniforms. Officer Chun, accompany Mr. and Mrs. Hayes to the living room. Sit down. We're not going anywhere until we sort this out. She then turned to me. Miss Bennett, show me this room. As I led Detective Vance and the other officer up the grand staircase, I felt the weight of the house's gaze. The portrait eyes seemed to follow us, judging, warning. Daniel followed numbly, his footsteps heavy behind us. We reached the 3rd floor corridor. The door to the East Wing room stood closed, looking innocuous. Detective Vance examined the modern deadbolt. The key? She asked. I handed her the tarnished key. It turned with a smooth click. The door swung open on the frozen tableau of Sarah's life. The uniformed officer let out a low whistle. Detective Vance stepped inside, her trained eyes taking in everything. The preserved bedroom, the desperate scratches on the wall, the open journal on the desk. She pulled on a pair of latex gloves and carefully picked up the diary, reading the final entries I had seen. Her face grew grimmer with each line. Officer, secure this scene. No one enters. Call for CSU and the medical examiner's office. Her voice was clipped, professional, but the gravity in it was unmistakable. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a potential homicide investigation. She turned to Daniel, who was standing in the doorway looking sick. Mr. Hayes, did you know about this room? No, he whispered, his eyes darting around the space, landing on the photo of the smiling young woman. His aunt who looked so much like me. I was told it was storage. That it was unsafe. That the floor was rotten. The floor seems perfectly sound, Detective Vance observed dryly. She looked at me. You said there was a note about your grandmother's death? In her journal. And I remembered my backup plan. When I was hiding from them, I used an old landline in a sitting room on the 2nd floor to call my friend. After I hung up, I left a note hidden in the phone receiver. In case they stopped me from talking to you. Detective Vance's eyebrows raised slightly in what might have been approval. Show me. We descended to the 2nd floor sitting room. The hidden note was still there, tucked in the telephone cradle. Detective Vance read it, then sealed it in an evidence bag. You have the journal your grandmother left you? She asked. It's in my car, along with the letter she wrote me. We'll need those. The sound of another car pulling up, tires crunching on gravel, came from below. I rushed to the window. Maya's familiar Prius was parked haphazardly behind the police cars. She was already out, talking urgently to an officer at the door. Relief, sharp and sweet, flooded through me. I wasn't alone. Minutes later, we were all gathered in the formal living room. A surreal tableau. Margaret and Robert sat rigidly on a velvet sofa. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Caldwell, having materialized with astonishing speed, now whispering furiously to them. Daniel stood apart by the fireplace, staring into the flames as if they held answers. Maya was by my side, gripping my hand tightly. Detective Vance stood in the center of the room, a calm authority amidst the storm. Based on the preliminary evidence in that room, the diary, the writings on the wall, I am opening an investigation into the death of Sarah Bennett Hayes, she announced. This house is now a crime scene. The third floor is sealed. Forensic teams are on their way. Margaret's composure finally cracked. This is an unconscionable invasion. Over the ramblings of a delusional child and an old diary? Sarah was mentally ill. She was a danger to herself. Then why seal her room like a shrine, Margaret? My voice cut through hers. Why keep her things untouched for 30 years? Why threaten my grandmother when she asked questions? You have no proof of any threat. Robert's lawyer, Caldwell, interjected. I have my grandmother's journal detailing the threat. And I have my own ears. I shot back, looking at Detective Vance. Less than an hour ago, in the hallway outside the study, I heard Robert Hayes say, and I quote, "Then we handle it. Like we handled Sarah. Like we handled Eleanor when she got too close." I turned my gaze to Daniel, who flinched. He said you would do what's best for the family. That you always have. Daniel's head snapped up. I don't know what you're talking about, Chloe. But the doubt was there. A seed of horror taking root in his eyes. This is hearsay. Caldwell blustered. It's a statement from a witness, Detective Vance corrected coolly. And it will be included in the report. She addressed the room. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, you are not under arrest at this time. However, I must ask you not to leave the Portland area. We will need formal statements from everyone. Today. She then turned to me and Maya. Miss Bennett, Miss Rodriguez, I'd like you to come down to the precinct to give your statements and provide the evidence you have. As we moved to leave, Margaret stood. The gracious hostess was gone, stripped away to reveal the cold, calculating core beneath. She didn't look at the detective. She looked only at me, and her voice was a low, venomous promise that only I could hear as I passed. You've destroyed my family. You think you've won? This is just the beginning, Chloe. Every family has its skeletons. Even yours. And I will make sure yours see the light of day. The threat was clearer than ever. She would come for me, for my reputation, for my own family's secrets. In the back of the patrol car, with Maya holding my hand as we followed Detective Vance to the precinct, the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion and fear in its wake. At the precinct, the process was methodical. I handed over Nana's chest, her journal, her letter. I gave my statement, recounting everything from the dreams to the discovery in the locked room. Maya gave hers, confirming my call and my state of mind. Detective Vance read through Nana's journal, her frown deepening. Your grandmother was a meticulous woman. These notes, she was building a case. She had dates, names, financial records about the family foundation. This goes beyond a grieving mother's suspicion. What happens now? I asked, my voice small in the sterile interview room. Now we investigate. We'll subpoena the sealed coroner's report on Sarah Hayes. We'll exhume her body if necessary. We'll look into your grandmother's death. We'll follow the money. She leaned forward. But you need to be prepared. The Hayes family is powerful. They will fight back with everything they have. They already threatened her, Maya said fiercely. In front of you in that house. Vague threats are hard to act on, Vance said, though her eyes were sympathetic. My advice? Get out of town for a few days. Go somewhere they don't know. And cancel that wedding. The wedding. It felt like a relic from another lifetime. The dresses, the flowers, the cake. All poisoned now by the knowledge of what I was marrying into. Daniel called as we left the precinct. I stared at his name on the screen, my heart a conflicted wreck. Maya looked at me. You don't have to answer. But I did. I had to hear it. Chloe. His voice was hollow, broken. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you're sick or confused or something. Tell me my parents aren't monsters. The pain in his voice was real. And part of me, the part that had loved him, ached for him. But the larger part, the part that had seen Sarah's prison and heard Nana's warning, hardened. I wish I could, Daniel. But I saw the room. I read her words. She was afraid of your mother. She was carrying your father's child, and they locked her away for it. A choked sob came through the line. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know any of this. But you knew something was off, I pushed, remembering the fear in his eyes when he told me not to upset his parents. You warned me not to dig. You said drama gets people hurt. He was silent for a long time. I know how they are. How they protect the family name. I never imagined this. Well, now you know, I said, exhaustion seeping into every word. The wedding is off, Daniel. It has to be. Chloe, wait. His voice was desperate. Don't make a decision now. In all this mess, what about us? What we had was built on a foundation of lies and covered up graves. There is no us anymore, Daniel. There can't be. I ended the call and leaned my head against the cool window of Maya's car. She drove us back to Seattle in a protective, furious silence. We went straight to my father's house, the modest, warm craftsman bungalow in Ballard that was the antithesis of the Hayes mansion. My dad, a history professor with kind eyes and gentle hands, listened to the whole story, his face growing paler and grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, he pulled me into a crushing hug. My God, Chloe. Sarah, all these years I wondered. Mom was so sure, but without proof. His voice broke. You brave girl. You did what I never could. That night in my old room, surrounded by the safe ghosts of my childhood, the final piece of the nightmare clicked into place. I was scrolling through news alerts on my phone when I saw it. A society piece from last year about the Hayes Family Foundation annual gala. The photo showed Margaret, radiant, accepting a philanthropy award. And standing just behind her, smiling politely, was Dr. Aaron Shaw, my grandmother's cardiologist, the man who had signed her death certificate. A cold certainty settled in my gut. This wasn't just a cover-up of a past crime. It was an ongoing system of protection, a network that reached into hospitals, police departments, and who knew where else. Margaret's threat echoed in my mind. This is just the beginning. She was right. Uncovering Sarah's room was just the first layer. The real battle, the battle for justice for Sarah, for Nana, and for my own future, was about to begin. And I had just walked onto the battlefield unarmed, with only the truth as my shield. The world didn't end with a bang after the confrontation at the Hayes mansion. It ended with a series of quiet, devastating tremors. The first was the silence. My phone, which had been buzzing relentlessly with wedding vendors and well-meaning friends, went dead still. The invitations had gone out. The news had spread. Chloe Bennett called off the wedding to Daniel Hayes. In the social circles that mattered to the Hayes family, this wasn't a personal heartbreak. It was a declaration of war, and the battlefield was reputational. The second tremor was legal. A formal cream-colored envelope arrived at my father's house 2 days later, delivered by a stern-faced process server. It was a cease and desist letter from Caldwell, Hayes, and Breckenridge, LLP. It accused me of defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with Daniel's prospective economic advantage, a phrase so coldly corporate it made me shudder. It demanded I retract all statements made to the police and the public, and threatened a lawsuit that would pursue all available remedies to the fullest extent of the law. My father, the gentle professor, read it with a look of grim fury. They're trying to scare you into silence, he said, his voice tight. They want you to drop the investigation. It's not my investigation to drop, I replied, though a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. The Hayes family's resources were bottomless. Mine were a teacher's salary and a graphic designer's freelance income. The third and most painful tremor was Daniel. He didn't call again, but he emailed. Long, agonizing emails that cycled through grief, confusion, anger, and pleading. Chloe, I've spent 2 days going through every memory, every conversation. I'm looking for the lie I must have missed. I can't find it in me to believe my parents are capable of what you say. But I also can't believe you would make this up. I'm stuck in a nightmare and I've lost you, the only person who could ever wake me up. Another read. My mother won't speak to me. My father says you're a gold digger who got cold feet and fabricated a story for sympathy. The media is starting to sniff around. They're calling you the runaway bride. They don't know the half of it. What do I do, Chloe? Who do I believe? I never replied. What could I say? Believe the woman who loved you or believe the parents who raised you? It was a choice that would shatter him either way. My silence was its own answer, and its own cruelty. A week after the disaster in Portland, I was sitting at my father's kitchen table, staring at a blank computer screen, trying and failing to muster the focus to work. Maya was with me, a constant, steady presence. You need to get out of this house, she said, not for the first time. Even just for a drive. You're turning into a ghost. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. My father answered it. I heard a familiar, calm voice. Detective Vance. She looked tired but focused as she entered the kitchen, accepting a cup of coffee from my dad. I won't sugarcoat it, she said, getting right to business. It's getting messy. She placed a digital voice recorder on the table. I interviewed Margaret and Robert Hayes separately, with their lawyers present. Their story is unified and simple. Sarah Hayes was mentally unstable, prone to fits and delusions. She was a danger to herself during her pregnancy. They restricted her movements for her own safety. Her death was a tragic accident, which a full police investigation at the time confirmed. They kept her room untouched out of grief, not guilt. And my grandmother? I asked, my throat dry. A sick, elderly woman with an overactive imagination, who tragically passed from natural causes. They deny ever threatening her. They claim her journal entries are the fanciful theories of a grieving mother. Vance sighed. It's a solid, believable narrative, especially backed by the original, sealed coroner's report, which I obtained. And Maya leaned forward. The report lists cause of death as blunt force trauma consistent with a fall downstairs. No signs of a struggle. Toxicology was clean. It was ruled an accident. Vance held up a hand as my face fell. But the coroner who signed off, retired 15 years ago to a very nice lake house in Chelan, purchased outright. The attending physician who pronounced her dead at the scene? Now the chief of staff at a hospital that's received millions in donations from the Hayes Family Foundation. A thread. A possible threat of corruption. We're digging into the financials, Vance continued. Your grandmother's notes about the family foundation are a roadmap. But it's slow. And they're fighting us every step with injunctions and appeals. She looked at me directly. This is where it gets hard for you. Their legal strategy is two-pronged. Stonewall the official investigation and discredit the source. That's you. The defamation suit, my father said. That's the public financial hammer. Vance nodded. The private pressure will be worse. Be prepared. They'll leak stories. They'll dig into your past. They'll try to isolate you. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. An email alert from a prominent Seattle society blog. The headline preview made my blood run cold. Runaway bride or calculated schemer? A look at Chloe Bennett's checkered past. I opened it with trembling fingers. The article was a masterpiece of insinuation. It mentioned my well-known anxiety issues, a semester of academic probation in college for missing exams when my mother was ill, a former roommate who described me as intense and secretive. It painted a picture of an unstable, manipulative woman who might concoct a wild story to get out of a wedding or worse, to extract a settlement. The comments were a cesspool. Gold digger. Psycho. She's probably just jealous of the Hayes family money. It starts, Detective Vance said softly, having read over my shoulder. They have PR firms for this. The feeling of being suffocated, of being rewritten into a villain in my own life story, was overwhelming. Maya grabbed my phone and shut it off. Don't read that garbage. But everyone else will, I whispered, the weight of their narrative crushing down on me. That night the dreams returned. But they were different. Nana wasn't in the church doorway. She was in the locked room. She was pointing not at me, but at the wall behind the vanity, at the scratches beneath the words, the baby. In the dream, the plaster crumbled away under her finger, revealing not wall studs, but a small dark cavity. I woke with a gasp, the image seared into my mind. A hiding place. Was it just a stress dream? Or was it the whisper Nana had always told me to listen for? I couldn't go back to Portland. The house was a sealed crime scene. But I needed to get that message to Detective Vance. The next morning, as I was trying to force down some toast, my father's landline rang, a rare sound. He answered, his face clouding with concern. "It's for you, Chloe. It's Daniel." My heart leapt into my throat. I took the receiver. "Chloe." His voice was raw, stripped of all its usual confidence. "I need to see you." "Daniel, I don't think that's a good idea. Your lawyer." "I don't care about the lawyer. I care about the truth." He took a shuddering breath. I went back to the house, to the room. The police have it taped off, but I stood in the doorway. I saw it. I felt it. The fear in that room is real. His voice broke. I found something else. Something they missed or didn't care about. It was in my old treehouse in the backyard. Sarah left it for me. "What?" I whispered, gripping the counter. "A letter. Addressed to me. She must have slipped it out a window or... I don't know. I was only 7 when she died. She wrote it like a fairy tale so I'd understand. About a princess locked in a tower by a wicked queen, who was afraid the princess's baby would be the true heir." He was crying openly now. "She told me to be a brave knight, to help the next princess who came along. She wrote, 'Don't let the queen win again, Danny.'" The sound of his childhood nickname, the heartbreaking faith Sarah had placed in a little boy, shattered something in me. Daniel wasn't the enemy. He was another victim, raised in the gilded cage of his family's lies. "My mother found me with the letter," he continued, his voice dropping to a terrified hush. "She took it. She burned it in the fireplace. She said it was proof of Sarah's insanity. But she looked scared, Chloe. For the first time in my life I saw my mother scared. That's when I knew. You were telling the truth." A sob escaped my throat. The validation coming from him was both a relief and a new kind of agony. "They're planning something," Daniel whispered urgently. "I overheard my father on the phone. He said, 'We need to discredit the source permanently. Use the brother.'" "Chloe, do you know what that means? Do you have a brother?" Ice water flooded my veins. "No, but my father has a brother. My uncle Mark." My uncle, my father's younger brother, was the family ghost. A charming, troubled man who'd battled addiction for years, drifting in and out of our lives. He'd been to rehab, had relapses, had borrowed money he never repaid. He was my father's secret sorrow and my grandmother's perpetual worry. A perfect tool for the Hayes family. "They'll find him," Daniel said, his voice desperate. "They'll pay him or threaten him to say anything, that you're unstable, that you coerced your grandmother into writing that journal, that this is all a scheme for money. They'll own his testimony. You have to find him first." The game had just changed. The battle was no longer just about the past. It was about survival in the present. The Hayes family was reaching into my own family's wounds to tear me apart. I thanked Daniel, my mind racing. When I hung up, I turned to my father, who had been listening, his face pale. "Dad, we need to find Uncle Mark. Right now." The search began in a panic. Calls to old phone numbers went to disconnected lines. His last known address was a halfway house in Tacoma. They said he'd left months ago, clean and aiming for a fresh start. No forwarding address. While my father made calls, I pulled Detective Vance aside. "The room. The locked room. I had a dream. It might sound crazy, but I think there might be a hiding place in the wall. Behind the scratches about the baby." Vance didn't dismiss it. In a case built on whispers and intuition, she was learning to listen. "I'll have the forensic team check when they do their full sweep. But Chloe, about your uncle. If the Hayes family finds him first, and he says what they want him to say, it could derail everything. It becomes a he said, she said, between two troubled families. The clear narrative you've built gets muddy." The pressure was a physical weight on my chest. We had to find Mark first. We had to warn him, protect him, and somehow convince him to choose truth over whatever temptation or threat the Hayes family offered. As night fell, the sense of being hunted was overwhelming. The Society blog had published another piece, this one speculating about potential mental health crises in my family tree. They were getting warmer. Exhausted, I finally fell into a fitful sleep, and Nana came again. This time she wasn't in the house. She was in her own cozy kitchen, the one I grew up in. She was placing a steaming mug of chamomile tea in front of me at the table. She smiled her warm, knowing smile and pointed to the little ceramic canister that always held her tea bags. Then she faded. I woke up, not with a gasp, but with a sudden crystal-clear knowing. I went to the small box of Nana's things I'd brought from storage. There, wrapped in tissue paper, was the tea canister. A painted thing with fat bumblebees on it. I opened it. It wasn't full of tea bags. Inside was a small sealed envelope and a tiny key on a chain. The envelope was addressed to me. The letter inside was short. Chloe, if you're reading this, you're in the thick of it. Remember the safety deposit box. Key enclosed. Box number 114, First Heritage Bank, Ballard. The password is your birthday and Sarah's combined. MMDDYY. What's inside is the last piece. I love you. Be brave. Nana. She had been preparing for this for years. She'd left a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow, knowing I might one day need armor. The next morning, with Maya by my side, I went to the bank. The safety deposit box contained no dramatic jewels or stacks of cash. It held a single thin file folder. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, not from the Hayes Family Foundation, but from a private, offshore account in Robert Hayes's name. There were a series of large, regular payments spanning years made to an LLC. A little digging on my phone revealed the LLC was a shell company, but its registered agent was a man named Carl Reiger, a name that appeared in Nana's journal with the question mark next to it. Also in the folder was a grainy photocopy of a photo. It showed a younger Robert Hayes with his arm around a man in medical scrubs outside a restaurant. The man was Dr. Aaron Shaw, my grandmother's cardiologist. Written on the back in Nana's hand, "They are friends. How convenient." And finally, a birth certificate. Not Sarah's. Not mine. A certificate for a baby boy, born to Sarah Bennett Hayes, date of birth, the day after her recorded death. Father Robert Hayes. The baby's name was left blank. The space for the attending physician was signed by Dr. Aaron Shaw. The room swayed around me. She hadn't just been pregnant. She'd given birth. The baby hadn't died with her. He had been born alive. Where was he? Adopted out? Hidden? What had they done with Sarah's son? This was no longer just about a covered-up murder. It was about a stolen life. A living, breathing person who was my cousin Daniel's half-brother, the true heir who had threatened Margaret's perfect lineage. Nana hadn't just given me the truth to save me from a bad marriage. She had given me the truth to save a lost boy, and to bring down a house of monsters once and for all. 6 weeks later, the rain fell softly against the courthouse windows, streaking the gray Seattle sky into a watercolor blur. Inside Department 12 of the King County Superior Court, the air was still and heavy with the weight of concluded testimony. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The simple gold band I now wore on my right hand, Nana's wedding ring, was a solid, warm weight. To my left sat my father, his arm a steady presence against mine. To my right, Detective Vance, now in a tailored suit rather than her usual detective's attire, gave me a small, firm nod. Across the aisle, Margaret and Robert Hayes looked like statues carved from ice and ash. Their expensive lawyer, Caldwell, shuffled papers with a tense energy that spoke of a battle already lost. Daniel was not there. He'd sent a letter to the court, read aloud earlier, stating he would not testify for either side and was seeking his own path toward understanding. His absence was a hollow space in the room. The civil case had moved with surprising speed once the dam broke. The evidence from Nana's safety deposit box, the birth certificate, the financial ties between Robert and Dr. Shaw, had been the catalyst. The district attorney, initially hesitant to reopen a 30-year-old accidental death, had convened a grand jury. Dr. Shaw, facing charges of fraud, falsifying records, and conspiracy, had cut a deal. His testimony was the sledgehammer. He confirmed it all on the stand, his voice a monotone of defeat. Sarah Hayes had not fallen. She had been heavily sedated by him under Robert's orders after giving birth in a private, off-the-books clinic. The fall had been staged. The baby, a healthy boy, had been taken. Shaw had falsified the death certificate and the birth certificate, creating a seamless lie. He had later, under pressure from Margaret, overseen the care of my grandmother, ensuring her heart attack was both timely and medically plausible. The missing heir had been the key. The Hayes fortune, built through generations, was governed by a strict arcane trust. A direct biological heir from Robert could not be disinherited. Sarah's son, if acknowledged, would have inherited a majority share, destabilizing Margaret's control and diminishing Daniel's portion. The pregnancy wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a dynastic threat. The criminal trial was still pending. But today was about the civil suit. Bennett versus Hayes. A suit for wrongful death, emotional distress, and conspiracy. It was about justice, yes, but also about truth, carving their lies into the official record forever. The judge, a stern woman with intelligent eyes, surveyed the room. "This has been a case of profound tragedy and deception," she began, her voice resonating in the quiet. "The evidence presented is both compelling and heartbreaking. It paints a picture of a family so consumed with preserving power and legacy that they extinguished 2 lives and stole a third." Margaret stared straight ahead, her profile a perfect, unyielding mask. Robert had aged a decade in 6 weeks, his shoulders slumped. "In matters of wrongful death," the judge continued, "the court seeks to make the injured party as whole as possible, recognizing that no sum of money can replace a life. However, it can serve as recognition of wrongdoing and provide a means for the living to rebuild." She then detailed the judgment. A sum so large it made the court reporter gasp, awarded to the estate of Sarah Hayes, to be held in trust for her son if he could be found. A separate, substantial sum awarded to me, for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and the wrongful death of my grandmother. The Hayes Family Foundation was to be dissolved, and its assets distributed to charities supporting domestic violence victims and families of the missing. But the final ruling was the one that made Margaret's mask finally crack. "Furthermore," the judge said, looking directly at Margaret and Robert, "given the nature of the crimes and the abuse of positions of trust, the court issues a permanent restraining order. Margaret and Robert Hayes are to have no contact, directly or indirectly, with Chloe Bennett or any member of her family. They are prohibited from speaking of her publicly or privately in a defamatory manner. Any attempt to contact, harass, or influence proceedings to find Sarah Hayes' son will result in immediate contempt charges and be considered in their pending criminal sentencing." It was over. The gavel fell with a final sharp crack. There was no dramatic outburst. Margaret simply stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked out, her head high, flanked by her lawyers. Robert followed, a broken man being led away. They would face criminal trial next month, but their social, financial, and moral bankruptcy was now complete and public. The victory felt cold and quiet. As we left the courthouse, a small cluster of reporters waited, but Detective Vance and my lawyer shepherded us to a waiting car. The rain had lightened to a mist. "He's out there somewhere, you know," my father said softly as the car pulled away. "Your cousin. Sarah's boy." The search for him was the one ongoing thread. The private investigator we'd hired, paid for with an advance from the civil judgment, had leads. The adoption had been private, illegal, but not untraceable. He would be 30 years old now. We had a name we were working with, Ethan. We would find him. We would tell him his story. And he would have the resources finally to build any kind of life he chose. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of the small cottage I'd rented on Whidbey Island, the Puget Sound spread out before me like a sheet of hammered silver. The air smelled of salt and pine. The relentless noise of the past year, the whispers, the threats, the courtroom statements, had faded into this profound, healing quiet. I was painting again. Not graphic design for clients, but messy, colorful abstracts on large canvases. They were full of dark corners being invaded by light, of tangled lines suddenly breaking into clear, open space. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Daniel. I'm in Boston. Started at a new firm. I'm in therapy. It's hard. I think about you every day, but I understand why you can't be part of my life. I just wanted you to know I believe you. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're finding peace." I read it 3 times. The anger toward him had dissolved, leaving only a sad, quiet pity. He was a casualty too, raised in a funhouse of mirrors, never knowing what was real. I didn't reply. Some bridges once burned needed to remain ash. The investigation into my uncle had proven my fears right. The Hayes family had found him first, in a fragile state of early sobriety. They'd offered him money to tell a story about my instability. But Mark, in a moment of clarity that still brought tears to my father's eyes, had called us instead. He was in a long-term treatment facility now, paid for by the family, truly trying to heal. The Hayes attempt to corrupt him had, ironically, been the thing that finally saved him. The final piece of closure came on a Tuesday morning. A thick envelope from the private investigator. Inside was a photograph. A man around 30 with kind eyes and a hesitant smile, standing outside a veterinary clinic in Boulder, Colorado. He had my father's chin and, I like to think, Sarah's gentle eyes. His name was Ethan Miller. He'd had a good childhood with loving parents who had, on their deathbeds, given him a sealed letter telling him he was adopted. He'd been looking for his roots. The report stated we had made cautious contact through the investigator. He was shocked, overwhelmed, but open to communication. He was a gentle soul, a vet tech who loved animals. He wanted to know his story. We would meet him carefully, gently, when he was ready. The trust fund the court had established would change his life, but we knew the truth we carried would change it more. I pinned the photo to my cottage wall, next to a picture of Nana and a scanned image of Sarah from her diary. 3 generations connected by loss and love, finally coming back into the light. That evening Maya drove up for dinner. We cooked pasta, drank wine, and laughed, real unburdened laughter that felt like medicine. "What now, Chloe Bennett?" she asked, toasting me with her glass. "You're rich, you're famous in a very weird true crime way, and you're free. The world is yours." I looked out at the darkening sound, the first stars prickling the violet sky. For so long my future had been a narrow path toward a wedding, then a battlefield, then a courtroom. Now it was an open field. "I'm going to find my cousin," I said. "I'm going to help my uncle. I'm going to paint terrible paintings and maybe get a dog." I smiled. "And I'm going to start a foundation, in Nana and Sarah's name, to help families of the missing, to support women leaving dangerous situations, to be the whisper that turns into a shout for someone else." Maya's eyes gleamed. "Now that sounds like a plan." Later, after Maya left, I walked down to the beach. The tide was out, leaving the sand firm and cool. My dead grandmother had warned me to cancel my wedding. Her warning had led me into a labyrinth of darkness, to the rotten heart of a powerful family. But it had also led me here. To this vast, open shoreline. To my own strength, which I never knew I possessed. To the truth which, though ugly, had set me, and a lost boy named Ethan, free. I hadn't just canceled a wedding. I had canceled a future built on graves. And in its place I was building something new, something honest, brick by careful brick. The last whisper I heard wasn't a warning. It was just the wind over the water, the call of a distant gull, the soft, endless sigh of the world turning over. It sounded like peace. It sounded like a beginning. The gallery opening was packed. My paintings, the Reckoning series, covered the white walls of a small, respected Seattle gallery. They were not pretty, but they were powerful. Splashes of blood red buried under layers of cool, calm blue. Black lines that looked like bars dissolving into gold leaf. Across the room, Ethan stood with my father, looking at a painting titled The Found Heir. He was still quiet, still processing, but he came to family dinners now. He called my dad Uncle. He had a peace about him that came from finally knowing where he started. My Uncle Mark, 6 months sober and steadier than I'd ever seen him, was laughing with Maya by the refreshment table. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Detective Vance, out of uniform. "You did good, kid," she said simply. The criminal trials had ended with guilty verdicts. Margaret and Robert were in prison, their legacy now a true crime documentary footnote. I smiled. We did good. As I looked around the room, at my stitched-together, wounded, healing family, I felt no hatred for the past, only a fierce gratitude for the present. My dead grandma's warning had been the best gift she ever gave me. It didn't just save me from a wedding. It led me home.